One of the things we need in our elected leaders, for them to tell the truth, even if it's unpopular. Donald Trump is not running for president to make America great again. Donald Trump is not running for president to represent the people that voted for him in 2016 and 2020. Donald Trump is running to stay out of prison. And if we elect, I know, listen, I know the truth is hard. But if we elect Donald Trump, we are willingly giving Joe Biden 4 more years in the White House, and America can't handle that. God bless you, and God bless America.
And happy Saturday, and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, August 5th, 2023. Another beautiful day. Might be hot for some folks. We're going to talk about that too a little bit later. But we got a ton of things to talk about. And in the lead-in, you saw Will Hurd, former congressman from Texas, one of the few black Republicans who don't support Donald Trump. Let me say that again. He's one of the few black Republicans that don't support Trump. Now let that sink in. And former Congressman Hurd, who is also an ex-military man, he's saying in front of a crowd in Des Moines, Iowa, that Donald Trump is trying to avoid going to jail by running for president. And Val Atkinson is here, and we're going to talk about that, Val. We got so much to talk about in terms of Donald Trump, right? You know, I mean, we're going to talk about the indictment, things that the special counsel has said, so on and so forth. But let's just start with Will Hurd. I mean, I think that's as clear as you can be about what this is all about. However, there's still people in MAGA land who refuse to acknowledge that Donald Trump has no leg to stand on legally. He certainly put the country in jeopardy a lot of different ways throughout his whole tenure, but especially on 1/6. So you heard Will Hurd. He said Donald Trump is trying to avoid jail. He gets booed by the crowd there in Des Moines. Let's start there. Number one, what do you think about what Will Hurd said? And number two, what are the MAGA people saying when they still support Donald Trump after all of this?
Well, that's a wonderful place to start, Ed, and I'll tell you why. That means all of the non-MAGA folks in the United States of America, we need to be clear as we can be about the motivations of these people that we don't understand. And the reason we don't understand them sometimes is that we have a set of rules and conditions that we operate under that we think are just, and they make a lot of sense. And it seems that there's another group of people that just discard these rules and issues. So what we have to do is get back to the bottom, get back to the starting position, and say, okay, what motivates these people to do what they're doing? Well, what motivates them, Ed, I believe, is abject fear. And that fear is that non-white people, non-conservative people are going to, at some point, be in charge of the United States of America. Now let that sink in for a minute. They are afraid that left to its own devices, if we have free, fair, and unfettered elections, that white liberals and progressives teamed up with people of color will have the majority in this country. So if you have a free election, they'll win just about every time. If there's no gerrymandering, if there is no hanky-panky behind the scenes, if there is no Senate Rule 22 that would allow the filibuster rule to go forth, if there's none of that, and it's just plain old democracy, they feel that their ilk is in deep trouble. And they are absolutely right. They would be in deep trouble. So whatever they do now to keep that from happening, they think it's okay. Like, somebody said there is, I think it was Goldwater, who basically said something about trying to save your life, your culture, in the face of complete destruction. Is nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it at all. And that's what the MAGA folks see. And I'm waiting for the day that most of us, a large number of us, begin to see that as well. Not believe it, but see that they see it. And that way we can approach problem solving a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right, Val. I was in DC most of the week, and right up the street from the courthouse, as a matter of fact, at one point, and I saw people come into town that had MAGA gear on, and if it were me, I guess I never would have been a MAGA in the first place, but at some point, you have to start to realize that you're not getting anywhere with this. That Donald Trump is getting indicted more and more often, and more things are happening in terms of information being revealed that he knew he had lost. Before we go any further, because I want to talk about specifically the indictments, I have a clip. This is Donald Trump getting ready to make a statement on 1/6, acknowledging that he had lost the election. Let's take a look at it, and then we'll talk about it. So, Val, that's behind the scenes video. And his staff has written him a statement for him to read. And he starts reading it. And it says, Congress has spoken, this is over, so on and so forth. And then he stops. He says, wait a minute, I don't want to say that. And then you can hear them still trying to prompt him to go ahead and say it, because they know what's happening down, or has happened down at the Capitol. And they are starting to want to get further away from this. And it's clear that they've been telling him the whole time that he's lost. And it's clear that he knows that he's lost. So here's the question about Donald Trump's psyche. He is not a good person. He is willing to lie, cheat, steal. And in terms of stealing, he may not have gone into a bank and robbed it, but he has not paid people who have done work for him. We know he lies, because now the whole argument now, Val, is that you have a right to lie under the First Amendment. And even if he knew he had lost, he has a right to say it. And they're trying to make some argument that this is now a First Amendment case. Donald Trump has been around a long time. I've been on the interweb looking at videos from, the 70s and 80s. And then all these rappers used to be around him, and he used to be at the fights with Don King and all this other stuff, right? He surrounded himself with people. And then I saw this video of Bill and Hillary Clinton at his wedding when he married Melania. But the one thing that was a bridge too far for him, I think, was a Negro as president. Because, even though there's some good white folks, back to your point about Negroes should not be in charge. Because we also know that the Trump family had been charged in the past with housing discrimination, including Jared, but Jared's father and the Trumps, of discriminating against Black folks in housing. That it's a problem for him when Barack Obama makes a joke about him, and then he goes ballistic, and now he's trying to prove that Barack Obama was born in Kenya, right? Again, another long way to a question here. In Donald Trump's psyche is this thing that Negroes cannot do anything or be in charge. He is still mad at Barack Obama, I think, but he also believes that Black folks should not be in power because he talks about the vice president in derogatory ways. And I think he plays into that MAGA supporters mindset by taking his own prejudices and amplifies them. Talk about Donald Trump's history of trying to play it both ways, but now it's completely exposed that he's just a racist. He's just another another person that hates black folk.
Donald Trump is out of his league. We have to go back and remember the Donald Trump when he was about the business of just making money, when he could lie, when he could have a bad deal, have a deal go bad on him, no problem, because it was all about making money. That was the only measurement as to whether his actions were successful or not. I go back to the USFL deal, trying to get a NFL team, trying to make somebody give that to him. All of the failed businesses about the neckties and the steaks and the wine and so forth and so on. None of that mattered. It never mattered to Donald Trump unless he admitted that he was wrong or he had lost. So the key to him was never admit that. Never admit that you're wrong about anything. Never admit that you lost. Just go on to the next step and the next phase. If you say it long enough, somebody, some group is going to believe you. So just keep moving and never stop. None of this mea culpa kind of stuff. Just keep moving. Then he ran into politics. And that's a whole different animal that he was not prepared for. I am on the side that says, Ed, I think if Donald Trump could turn back the clock, back to 2014, let's say, a year before coming down the escalator, I'm not sure if he would get involved in politics if he knew what he knows right now. But he did. It works differently than the selling of himself, the selling of his company or his products and services. And he can't handle that because people judge you by the law, not by what you say and how tough you sound and behave. But is it legal, what you've done and what you've said? And he's out of his realm, he's out of his comfort zone, and he can't handle this. So you were right in the beginning. Heard was right. He's doing what he's doing now to stay out of jail. You know, this is the only shot he's got to beat the legal system is to become the 47th president of the United States of America and make it work that he is pardoned for all of his misgivings and misdeeds.
Or hope a Republican gets in the office that will pardon him. You know, if you're watching, this is The Deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. It's Saturday, August 5th. Clearly, you know, another monumental week in U.S. history where a thrice indicted president, when in the whole 240 some years, we had zero. And this dude is 3 times and looking to be indicted a 4th time. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed on any of the platforms. We're growing the audience. You can subscribe on Spotify. You can Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. If you want to see our lovely faces, you can always go to the website and watch it and subscribe to the feed there. You can go to Facebook and watch it. People subscribe there. So we got people in all these different platforms. I'm not one to chase and say, oh, I want you to give us, you know, 1 million subscribers, whatever. We would love that. But what we want to do is we want to make it available on as many platforms as possible. And so so you don't have to go to just one place. There's a lot of places you can get it. And Val would appreciate that because he puts a lot of work into this, and I do too, Val. You know, on a serious note, we have to do a lot of reading and watching TV and using our knowledge from our education and everywhere else to to even talk about these subjects in a learned way. There's a lot of podcasts you can watch, folks, or listen to, and a lot of folks don't bother to actually read anything, but we do. And I read the indictment, Val, at 45 pages. I am not a lawyer. I tell people all the time. I listen to Supreme Court arguments. I listen to appeals court arguments when they're available. I read them. I read this indictment, and special counsel made a statement about that Jack Smith. Let's take a look at what he said, and then we'll talk about it.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. Since the attack on our capital, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law.
So, Val, I think it's clear that Jack Smith ain't playing with Donald Trump, right? We knew that he was a serious dude, and in his statement, he lays out the case here, but he can't show all his cards. He has more evidence. He has more people that he can call on later on, especially when trial comes. But one of the things that Donald Trump has been trying to do is sully the jury pool, and also to influence public opinion by leaking evidence and saying things. And then overnight, on Friday night, the Department of Justice and Jack Smith's office requested from the judge that Trump be admonished again that he cannot be talking about discovery that's been given to them. We know that Trump's desperate. But talk to me about Jack Smith just a little bit. From what you've seen, what do you think about him and his approach? And then I did hear a little bit of criticism still that he didn't go all the way with seditious conspiracies and some other charges he could have made. But overall, how do you think Jack Smith is performing so far?
I think Jack Smith is exactly what the Justice Department needed. I think for once in his life, Merrick Garland made the right decision by appointing Jack Smith as a special prosecutor to handle this case. I don't think the case would have been where it is now or been handled properly had it been handled by Merrick Garland or some other person other than Jack Smith. Jack Smith is the kind of guy, he's no nonsense. He doesn't play anything. We used to say when I was growing up here that some people, they quit school because they had recess. They didn't play anything. They didn't like to play. He is all business. And it takes me back to the first indictment the first arraignment, that he had where Donald Trump was present. And he stared at Donald Trump the entire proceeding didn't take his eye off of him. He was sending a message to Donald Trump that, hey, I don't know what you're used to, but here's a guy that's your enemy that ain't afraid of you, and I'm here to take you down. And I think Donald Trump hasn't seen an adversary the likes of Jack Smith in his life. He's always been able to figure out the weakness of his adversary or to dismiss them as irrelevant or whatever. Jack Smith is a total different animal. He's smart. He has the legal backing that he needs. He has the official backing that he must have. And I dare say he has the backing of the American people, the majority of us, on his side. So this is a problem for Donald Trump. He's never been in a situation like this before, facing this kind of adversary. Jack Smith is Donald Trump's worst nightmare.
I will agree with you there. I hear some music in my ears, so that means we need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk about this. I know folks are probably saying, well, Donald Trump, I'm sick of this. Yes, I am sick of Donald Trump. Trust me. Trust and believe I'm sick of Donald Trump. However, if you ignore history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? Isn't that the mantra, Val? And so we cannot ignore this. It's too important. So stay right there, but we'll be right back after these messages.
There's been another deadly shooting at a local elementary school. According to authorities, the suspect acquired the gun from a family member's home before using it to take the lives of innocent children and teachers.
Store your gun securely, locked, unloaded, and away from ammo.
Every time they file an indictment, we go way up in the polls. We need one more indictment to close out this election.
It comes one day after pleading not guilty to 4 felony counts for allegedly trying to overturn the 2020 election.
This is the persecution.
That's the former commander-in-chief moments after being released under conditions to not violate federal or state laws, must appear in court as required, sign an appearance bond, and have no contact about the facts of the case with witnesses, except through counsel. In the meantime, in a similar case, Trump defense reportedly dropped their motion to have Fulton County DA removed from the investigation around efforts to change the outcome of the election there. A probe that involves the recorded phone call Trump made to the Georgia Secretary of State's office, asking them to find the votes needed to win. Criminal charges in that case are expected to be filed soon.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. I won't say this is a special show, but we have a lot of emphasis in this show on the indictment, the third indictment of Donald Trump that happened this week. I was in D.C. this week and was able to see people in town. It wasn't a big crowd, but there were people in town that still supported Donald Trump, which still mystifies me. Donald Trump is still out on the hustings giving speeches. And on the way back in, you saw him in Alabama at a Republican event there last night, trying to make his case that he's being persecuted. They're after me. I'm here for you. Now, he's saying, Val, that he's suffering indignities of being prosecuted for the people of America. And he also now has trotted out this whole other canard about this being a First Amendment situation. His lawyers have been on TV. Lindsey Graham, his lapdog, has been on TV. Rudy Giuliani, the sweaty Four Seasons lawn care promoter, has been on TV talking about this being the First Amendment issue. So let's start there, Val. Let's dig into some history. What the First Amendment is about. You're supposed to be able to say stuff about the government or government officials, stuff in general that you like or don't like, without being prosecuted for it. It does not say, though, that you can incite people to riot. It does not say you can yell fire in a crowded theater. It does not say a lot of things that it seems to me that are implied by the actions of Donald Trump. He spent months and now years lying, telling people that the election was stolen, knowing full well that it wasn't. And on 1/6, he actually told people he was going to walk down to the Capitol with them. To do what? To do what, Val? So let's start there. What in the hell is this First Amendment argument they're trying to make? Where did they pull that out of? I guess out of their ass, which is, but where, I mean, is it because they just lost all arguments and they're just trying to pull whatever they can?
Well, you've got to have some semblance of a defense, or you might as well just say, hey, throw up both hands and, hey, I'm guilty. So they've decided that they're going to hang their hat on this First Amendment piece. And all they want to do is get in a long, drawn out argument about it. And they're hopeful that what will happen is that there will be some settlement in the middle someplace. This is a First Amendment piece, and I was just exercising my rights. And the other side says, no, you weren't. You were inciting people to do bad things. So let's come in the middle someplace. And let's say I agree to, okay, half of that and half of this, but I'll just get a slap on the wrist, whatever. These guys are arguing for a diminished sentence, for a slap on the wrist, for all of those kinds of things. They know they can never, Ed, get away with any. The charges that Jack Smith has brought up are indefensible. They can't do anything. So this is a ruse that the Trump folks are putting up about these are my First Amendment rights, or this is whatever. They're hoping we can get into a long, drawn out argument about that. And hopefully Jack Smith and his crew will make a mistake somewhere while we're arguing the merits of this case and that sort of thing. That's what they're hoping, but it's not going to work. So they could have gotten anything. They could have argued anything. But they decided, I think you're right. I agree with you 100%. They've decided to hang their hat on Trump's First Amendment rights. I don't think it'll go anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, why is he doing this and taking this route? I am going to be the last one that's surprised, Ed, when Trump is found guilty and MAGA decides to try to have a real physical insurrection in the United States of America. I'm not going to be surprised that that happens. It's the only way he can win. It's the only way. He's hoping that somebody will say, okay, give them 4 or 5 states and let them go their own way. We don't want this anymore. That's what they want. That's all Jeff Davis wanted back in 1860. That's all they want. And it's never, ever going to happen. They don't have the power to do anything else. All of this argument, all of this First Amendment crap is a ruse. They are headed for something akin to, I hate to say it, a second civil war.
Well, I'm glad you bring that point up, Val, because that comes up a lot on a lot of other podcasts I've been looking at over the last year or so. There are people who talk about that, and again, you're a historian, and particularly on the Civil War, and when you look at the conditions here, though, the one thing I think that would prevent an all-out civil war is that Americans still live pretty damn comfortably, right? And to fight a civil war, you got to know that you're going to tear shit up. and you could be shot or killed or whatever. I think a lot of the MAGAs wear their patriotism on their sleeve, right? They're jingoistic. They'll wave a flag. They'll talk about fighting. They'll even walk around with a gun strapped to them, but they won't do anything because they know that means that their Ford F-150 pickup in the driveway is going to go away. They won't have that. they won't have their vacation to Vegas. They won't be able to go to, the ball game and watch Negroes run up and down the field. I mean, let's be honest. Despite all the whining that Americans do about how terrible things are, they're not terrible. They're terrible for some people, and they're terrible on a spectrum, right? Because we talked about this the last time we were on. The American religion of capitalism, right? That plays into this whole thing, right? That back to what you started out talking about at the beginning of the show, that people don't want to give up their position of power and perceived power in the aggrandizement of the U.S. And it comes across in history and stuff like that, which we're going to talk about in the third segment about how they want to rewrite history, right? So here is Bill Barr, who was Donald Trump's attorney general. And after the election, Barr was kind of squishy and wishy-washy on whether or not there was any election fraud. But listen to what he says here, and then we'll talk about it.
Everyone was telling him that the election was not stolen by fraud.
Do you think he knew that he lost the election?
Do I personally believe that? Yeah, at first I wasn't sure, but I have come to believe that he knew well that he had lost the election.
And they're also saying that he was just exercising his First Amendment right here. Do you think that's a valid argument in your view?
No, I really don't think that's a valid argument because, as the indictment says, they're not attacking his First Amendment right. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie. He can even tell people that the election was stolen when he knew better. But that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. All conspiracies involve speech, and all fraud involves speech. So, free speech doesn't give you the right to engage in a fraudulent conspiracy.
The other thing that there are...
Well, Bill Barr went on NPR. He went on all these places after the election. Says, well, I'm not sure we're investigating it. He knew good and damn well Donald Trump lost. He just said it right there. He says Donald Trump lost. Everybody told him he lost. And then when the reporter presses him, do you believe Donald Trump thinks he lost? He says, well, I'm not sure, but everybody told him. Donald Trump knows he lost. What? And so why has Bill Barr found religion after the third indictment? Because we're going to talk about the other person that found some religion in a little bit. But what's up with Bill Barr? I don't like Bill Barr. I never have. I think he's dangerous. But talk to me about Bill Barr and what he's doing now.
Bill Barr is a chess player that thinks that everybody else is playing checkers. I think he's underestimating a lot of people. Let's go back to the unitary executive, his whole starting point, the 19-page handwritten letter that he wrote to Donald Trump that got him into that position that he was in the first place. Bill Barr wanted to be Attorney General. Bill Barr got to be Attorney General. He did a lot of other things that were horrible and bad. Bill Barr now thinks that the American people are so stupid, and they're still playing not checkers, they're playing tic-tac-toe, he thinks, okay, that he can just run intellectual circles around us. And now he's preparing himself to be one of the good guys that helped defeat MAGA. So he'll be safe. We're going to forget about the 19-page paper. We're going to forget about the unitary executive. We're going to forget all of the things that he did to help Mitch McConnell fill the courts with right-wing crazies and that sort of thing. We're not going to forget about that. That's where Bill Barr is coming from right now. He's about the business of image management. He's trying to control his image now. He's trying to be one of the good guys. How many non-MAGA people have we heard recently, Ed, say, Bill Barr's got a point. Did you hear what Bill Barr said last week? And it makes it, He's getting himself on the other side of Donald Trump. He's trying to make us forget that he helped Trump become who Trump is now, politically speaking. And he encouraged Trump to do all of the crazy things that he did. And I, for one, am not going to be fooled by all of this sudden reversal and nicey stuff. He's not going to help me to arrest the killer. And then I found out later on the killer was him, and forgive him. No, I'm not going to do that. So Bill Barr is slick, but he's not Teflon.
Yeah, he's trying to outsmart people, Val. I do agree with you there 100% because Bill Barr believes that the president can do damn near anything. That unitary executive thing. I don't know how. I guess people's memories are so short here, but Donald Trump would have been toast had he not interfered in the Comey and in the first investigation over Ukraine and some of the other and the first impeachment. He ran interference for Donald Trump because he maybe doesn't want Donald Trump to be president, but he wants a Republican theocracy in place that can't be touched by the courts, or if they are touched by the courts, then the courts are already stacked in your favor. To your point, he loves what Mitch McConnell did with the courts because they don't believe in affirmative action. They don't believe in Voting Rights Act. They don't believe in none of that stuff. So when Bill Barr tries to rehabilitate himself by telling the truth that Trump knew he didn't win, it doesn't go any. There's no currency with me. He can't buy penny candy with me with that because it's too late. Because I know who he really is. Here's another person, Val, that's found religion all of a sudden. This is the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It wasn't just that they asked for a pause. The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes, essentially to overturn the election.
Well, I love Mike Pence on leash. Listen,
I know that's what literally I was like, wow, that's a lot from
his
Mike
lips
Pence.
to God's ears. I think he's going to turn out to be the most important witness in this case. I think it's very likely that he's going to take the stand. He knows better than most people because there were conversations, to the best of my knowledge, that were directly between just him and the president. No former president, no staff around. He did keep contemporaneous notes. And I applaud him for being unequivocal and telling the truth about this. When you look at the GOP field, there's really only a few who are telling the truth about what we all saw with our own eyes on January 6th and the weeks leading up to it.
Man.
So, Val, Mike Pence is at the fair, standing in front of a tractor, just being humble old Mike Pence. But he gets all sort of, he usually speaks in like these really muted tones, but he raises his voice and he says, and the president tried to get me to wait 10 days and blah, blah, blah. Why haven't we heard that before now, Val? Here's my speculation as to why. Because, one, he knew he was going to run for president, and he thought he could get some of the MAGA votes. Mm-hmm. But now that he knows the evidence that Jack Smith has, he knows that's a lost cause. So now he's going to try to hope that people leave Trump, but still want a theocratic Republican president, which is him, that's who he truly is. But he's banking on the fact that Trump has screwed the pooch, so to speak, so bad that he can't come back from it. So now is his time to go ahead and tell the truth, like the General Barr did. So, Val, Mike Pence ain't going to be president, is he? And shouldn't he know that, and that this is not going to help him at all? Or is he just delusional?
He knows he has a snowball's chance in hell to become 47. He knows that. But I agree with you, Ed. He thought he could be in the beginning. when he at first tossed his hat into the ring, that the tumblers were going to fall in a certain order, and he would end up being 47. Now that he's found out that that ain't going to happen, he's trying to figure out, how do I find myself navigating this maze that I find myself in? How do I get out of it with some semblance of respect and have people to think that I'm still a guy that's in control of his sanity? And he ain't figured that out yet because he keeps contradicting himself. On the one hand, he's still loyal to Donald Trump. And then we heard him down in places like Alabama say what he said. I saved you. I saved this democracy by not taking up the suggestion that they have for waiting for 10 days and that sort of thing. So I need credit for that. You should be helping me celebrate the fact that I saved this democracy. Can't have it both ways, Pence. And the truth of the matter is that you did nothing that you were not supposed to do in the first place. And had Dan Quayle not told you what he told you, the question is, what would you have done anyway? But we can't give you credit for doing your job, what you were supposed to do, or not committing a crime, which you should not do. So we're not going to give you any credit for that. You want to earn credit, do some of the right things, go and become a cooperating witness for Jack Smith and tell all that you know about your former boss, Donald Trump. That's how you can get our respect and get some credit, not this crazy trumped up, pardon me, if you will, stuff that he's trying to do now by pretending that he has been doing the right thing vis-a-vis Donald Trump.
Well, there's nothing he can do to rehabilitate himself in my eyes. And I will tell you that he's not going to make it through most of the primaries, and he'll fade away in the history as a failed vice president, along with a failed president. You know what? Well, I hear some music, so that means we need to take another break. On the way out, you're going to see Fani Willis, who's the DA in Fulton County, Georgia, talking about another pending case. And then when we come back, I want to talk about some history, Val, the history of hypocrisy in the Republican Party. I want to talk about Ken Starr and Bill Clinton, and I want to talk about Richard Nixon. And then we'll end up talking about history in Florida, some more fallout from the Florida African-American history curriculum. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
May not be happy with the decisions that I was making, and sometimes when people are unhappy, they act in a way that could create harm. The work is accomplished. I mean, we've been working for 2.5 years. We're ready to go.
Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis says she's prepared for an indictment against former President Donald Trump. Willis is reportedly targeting any time until August 18th as a period to press charges against Trump recommended by the grand jury. Willis did not comment in detail on the possible fourth indictment, but said she has a duty to prosecute if Trump did violate the law in the Peach State. Trump was arraigned for the third time this year in Washington, D.C. on charges related to his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. It is widely believed if Trump is indicted in Georgia, it will be on charges based on his attempts to overturn his 2020 loss in the Peach State.
My baby's back from the West Coast. Here are those pictures that you asked for your school project? First day of school, cute as a button.
So long ago.
Oh, here's Grandma Florence after that flood wiped out the whole neighborhood. Sometimes I just cannot believe all the storms we've gone through here. I can only hope that we'll be able to leave this house to you one day, baby. You're our legacy.
Planning for these disasters will make sure we're safe. And it's the best way to protect that legacy.
Those beans smell heavenly.
Give Mom a little credit.
You know what? We should make an emergency communication plan. That way we're ready this year.
Oh,
Great idea.
At my dorm, we have emergency kits for earthquakes and wildfires, but I'm sure there's something more local I can send you with the link.
Okay.
Smart.
I'm coming to share with you guys.
Protect your legacy. Plan for natural disasters today. Visit ready.gov/plan.
And my family unanimously urged me to do so. But the interests of the nation must always come before any personal considerations. From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. To continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, August 5th, 2023. We've been talking all things Donald Trump and his legal travails and his indictment and all that kind of stuff. On the way back in, you saw another Republican criminal. That was Richard Nixon and his part of his resignation speech. And Val, I mentioned that I was in D.C. this past week. When I went on my morning walks, I walked by the Watergate every morning and looked over there. And I think, people, I saw tourists out walking and stuff. I think they have no idea about going down to that side of town and down near Foggy Bottom and and all the lobbyists on K Street and all the corruption that was, in the Republican Party trying to overthrow or ensure that Richard Nixon won the election and what they were willing to go through, which led to him resigning from office. And we talked a little bit before we came on about history and do people learn anything from history? You would have thought, Val, at least I would have, because I'm old enough to remember those hearings being on. I was 9 years old, which is you're cognizant, what's going on in the news. You see your parents and your grandparents watching that stuff. And it's important. And at the time we lived in DC and when all of that was going on. And you realize what's happening. It's very important. Some important shit is going down, right? That the president has to resign. And so all the faults of Richard Nixon, he had one thing going for him, I think, in the eyes of history. He was smart enough to get the hell out. But Donald Trump wasn't. And you would have thought he would, because he surrounded himself with people like Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, who were around with Richard Nixon when he resigned. Now, of course, Manafort ends up going to jail. Trump didn't save him from going to jail, but he saved Roger Stone from going to jail. He saved Steve Bannon from going to jail. So these people had convictions coming into this, right? And Trump still did not learn anything from Richard Nixon, which is that sometimes you have to be statesmanlike. I guess you can still be a statesman even after you were a criminal, but have the gumption to continue on as opposed to having the humility to resign. So I guess I'm gonna ask you, because you were around, you saw those Watergate hearings. We know people like Rufus Edmondson and Sam Ervin and Hillary Clinton and all those names from that period who sat there and questioned people about what was going on when it became clear that Richard Nixon didn't do half the stuff that Donald Trump did. And he knew that he had to resign. Why is it that we still have people who are hanging on for dear life, knowing full well the history of Watergate and what happened with all of that?
We go back to what we discussed in the last segment, Ed, and that is Trump comes from a different era, from a different type of discipline. He's never been in politics before. I think if Trump would have had some kind of grounding in politics, I think he may have considered doing some of the things that we're talking about now. But having no grounding in politics and having all of his grounding in big dealings with big dollars on the end, one way or the other, he was ill-suited to take on some of the options that we're talking about now. He couldn't do that. There's no way. He felt that all he had to do was to tell you, go see my lawyer, I'll see you in court, and continue doing what he's been doing all the while. You can't get around the fact that during Watergate, Ed, which I'm glad you brought that up, because I was in D.C. working at the time. So that means I'm about a year or two older than you, maybe. At any rate, on Sundays, I had a little schedule. I'd walk down to the liquor store and get a newspaper and walk next door to the deli and get some eggs and bacon and whatever, come back and start cooking breakfast, lay the Washington Post down on the living room floor and get down on my hands and knees and eat breakfast and read the Washington Post. And the top headline and everything every week was always what's going on in Watergate. What did Woodward and Bernstein uncover this week? What happened with Nixon and who was the next guy? The good thing about it, Ed, in addition to reading about it in the Post, it was televised during the week. You couldn't do anything, go anywhere without seeing that. And we haven't brought this up yet, but I want to take this opportunity to go there. Please, please, please allow these proceedings with Donald Trump to be televised. We've got to have that going, because without that, then it becomes he said, she said. It becomes whose version of the lie do you want to believe? And Trump is good at that. Regardless of what the truth is or what someone else says, he's going to have his own version. So now we begin talking about whose version is right. But if you put this on TV, then it's a little more difficult for Trump to get away with saying or asking, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And people can see this for themselves. That is very problematic for the strategy of Donald Trump post-trial, after things happen, trying to tell a lie to his MAGA folks. It won't wash.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about that, Val, because, in federal court, all you get is those pictures that somebody draws, and they can only convey so much, and you don't even have audio. And something's going to have to happen. I think Chief Justice Roberts can influence what happens here, yeah. And I'm not sure. I can't read Roberts because sometimes I think he's reasonable. Sometimes I think he's just another right-wing jurist, right? And we don't know. But I think the only thing that would make this palatable for more Americans is, like you said, having this broadcast and being able to see it, because seeing the Watergate hearings and in the way they were run and people getting the information and all those dramatic testimonies day after day after day of people saying, you know, Richard Nixon had tapes and this, that, and the other, was his undoing, because it wasn't, like you said, just that he said, she said. There were people in the White House that got up and said it. But I will say this one thing. We saw a lot of those same people in the 1-6 hearings, but Fox didn't show it, right? And other places didn't show it. But I think if it was in the courtroom of a trial of Donald Trump, where he potentially could get on the stand and testify, because that's the only way he's going to be able to fight this on the First Amendment grounds, is he's going to have to get up and say, oh, yeah, I said that. But I did, you know what I'm saying? But people are going to have to see him get up there and say that he lied, right? Before those people believe it, right? Before they believe their lying eyes, yeah. as you say. You know what? One other piece of history real quick before we end up with what I want to talk about, which is the Florida African-American history curriculum, which is related to me, is how quickly we forget, Val. I want to show you a clip from this guy named Ken Starr talking about how important it was to get to the truth of some guy named Bill Clinton, and we'll talk about it.
But in Little Rock, in his other grand jury that will likely be dismissed this week, the independent counsel's been targeting people you've probably never heard of. He did get some pretty big fish, former Governor Jim Guy Tucker and former Associate Attorney General Webb Hubbell. But in his effort to net the biggest fish of all, the President and the First Lady, the independent counsel went after some very small fish indeed. And he used some pretty tough tactics, and among others, a woman named Sarah Hawkins. Sarah Hawkins' run-in with the independent counsel began when federal agents handed her a letter from Starr's office saying she was the subject of a criminal investigation and that there was, quote, substantial evidence against her.
My first reaction was I thought it was a joke. I even told them 2 FBI agents delivered the letter, and I thought, you guys are kidding.
Sarah Hawkins was accused of being part of a scheme to illegally backdate loan appraisals more than a decade ago when she worked as an officer of the now-defunct Madison Savings and Loan, the bank owned by Jim McDougal, Bill and Hillary Clinton's partner in the failed Whitewater land deal. Hawkins' accuser...
Tell Val. Supposedly, Ken Starr started his special investigation because there was a deal for some land in Arkansas, and they pressed this sister to try to get her to testify against Hillary and Bill. They ruined her life, threatened her, but never prosecuted her or anything. But you know what they did find out? They found out that Bill Clinton got a BJ in the White House, and that he got disbarred for lying to prosecutors, and he got impeached but was not convicted. We know that part of it, right? And he served 2 terms. All during that process, Val, I heard Newt Gingrich and people yelling and screaming that the integrity of the presidency was so important. And even if it was a BJ, it was serious enough to get rid of Bill Clinton. Now I hear the same people tell me that the president can lie with impunity about losing the election and cause a riot that was a coup attempt from people, whether they misguided or not. Oh, that's nothing compared to Bill Clinton getting a BJ. That's what I hear when I hear them talk. Am I right about that? Is it just straight up hypocrisy? Or am I missing something? Is there a point that they had to make when they tried to impeach Bill Clinton, or was that weaponizing the Justice Department?
Oh, yeah, it was definitely weaponizing the Justice Department, because Ken Starr had orders to follow the facts wherever they may lead. And you don't close this case out and you don't come back here, Mr. Barr, until you have an indictment on Bill Clinton for something. And as you pointed out as well, they started off talking about a land deal, Whitewater in Arkansas, ended up filing charges against Bill Clinton for perjury against something totally unrelated, having oral sex in the White House, consensual with a mature person who consented to have oral sex with him. So that's no crime there. The crime was that Bill Clinton lied about it. So they decided to go this route. They wanted something on Bill Clinton. So that's what they got. They don't see that these two things have any similarities involved in them. This is a trumped up case against Donald Trump for lying, which he didn't do because the election still was stolen. And Bill Clinton was the worst scumbag on earth for lying to the special prosecutor about his relationship with Monica Lewinsky. This is as bad as it gets, Ed. Doesn't get any worse. But there's no need for us to try to figure out the mindset of the MAGA folks. It's a fool's errand. You can't figure them out. There is no logic involved. And anybody who sits on that path of trying to figure out a system, a set of facts, a whatever, to get MAGA guys to say, oh, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, you're right. I changed my mind. I want to come and be a nice guy. It ain't going to ever happen.
No, it will never happen. Which brings me to the last topic for today, about coming to some realization about history and the truth. In Florida, we know that, there's been some disagreement over the African-American history curriculum for middle schoolers. And we talked about one of the people last week, Byron Donalds, who is a Black Republican who had the temerity to say that there was nothing good about slavery. And then he got accused of being woke by DeSantis and the right, but he's a MAGA Republican. Byron Donalds is as MAGA as you can get. He's as Trumpy as you can get, but he's Trumpy for a reason, because he's one of those evangelical Negroes who believe that whatever evangelical people say about the goodness and righteousness of America, because the Lord is smiling down on America specifically, right? Everybody else be damned. The Lord loves America. We're going to talk about that at some point on a whole show about that, because so there's two other Negroes I want to talk about, Val. Kimberly Daniels, the Reverend, who's also a state legislator in Florida and was on the curriculum panel, and William B. Allen, who is a former Reagan and Bush appointee over on equal opportunity side of the house, supposedly, former professor at Michigan State, but a George Washington apologist. He says, well, George Washington had slaves, but, what was he going to do? He couldn't just let them go because they wouldn't have anywhere to go. So he was protecting them.
Yeah, sure.
By keeping them enslaved, right? Now, isn't that a nice guy? Here you go. Let's hear a little bit, and I do mean a little bit, of Kimberly Daniels and Will Allen, just so you get a flavor of these people.
And talk about the Holocaust, but the Jews own everything. I thank God for slavery. I thank God for the crack house. If it wasn't for the crack house, come on somebody, God wouldn't have never been able to use me how he can use me now. And if it wasn't for slavery, I might be somewhere in Africa worshiping a tree.
Leave nothing out within the realm of human capacities.
Leaving nothing out, says Dr. William Allen, is including a full, detailed story of the African American experience in Florida curriculum. The former chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights volunteered to be part of the work group of 13 that wrote it for the State Department of Education.
We need to tell people's stories the way they told their stories, not to fit our expectations.
The national outrage exploded mostly over a benchmark included in a lesson about the kinds of labor enslaved people were forced into. That, quote, slaves developed skills from which they could personally benefit. A state education director found himself explaining that to teachers this week.
The story of a resilient people who responded to their oppressors in an adaptive manner.
Dr. Allen insists the history of enslaved people as an American atrocity is also one comprised of varied and complex accounts.
The stories of the people who lived through the history. They have a right to tell their story in their own words. And what we have provided for is the telling of those stories as they themselves told it.
We asked why Florida's anti-communism education might not also teach how Fidel Castro provided Cubans free education and medical care.
I can only answer for that to which I contributed.
So, Val, out of her own mouth, Kimberly Daniels says Black people benefited from slavery. This is before she was on this panel. She said the reason why Black people were better off slaves is because they would have been in Africa praying to a tree, and Christianity saved them. And God wanted them to be slaves so they could come to Christ.
Boy, don't get me started on that one, Ed.
Well,
time on the show.
Well, and then the second little piece there was William B. Allen, who says, hey, well, you know, we got to look at the good and bad in everything. And he's just trying to get people, children, to realize that stuff may look bad on the surface, but there's a benefit on the end. But when you dig into William B. Allen's background, he comes from the same evangelical Christian background. He makes his living now by speaking at evangelical white colleges, talking against woke culture and talking against why Black folks need to be more appreciative and why the church is the only thing that can save Black folks. So these are the two people, Val, the state of Florida, picked to be on their panel to develop the curriculum. They didn't go out and get scholars in other places that may have a contrary opinion. Everybody on that panel is cut from that cloth. And then you got two Black people. Kimberly Daniels made her living for a long time on places like the 700 Club and on TBN, faith healing, knocking people in the head, speaking in tongues. And that's who's developing your curriculum. Now, before I let you say something, Val, so all our religious buddies out there, you can be mad at me if you want to. We can talk about it. So send me an email if you want to, ed@thedealwithedclark.com. Or if you want to come on here and talk about it, we'll talk about it. But this whole notion that that Christianity saved Black people because they would have been, I guess, naked in the jungle in Africa, Val, is an old saw from white folks who said Black people shouldn't learn how to read, that they should be taken to church and told specifically how the Lord was helping them because now they're Christians. Talk to me real quick before we run out of time.
Don't even know where to start, Ed. One thing that they have in common with people like Clarence Thomas, and we've almost gone through a whole show without talking about him, and that is, once those kinds of Negroes have an issue with the average Black movement and purpose of African Americans in this country, they stick with that regardless of what the issue is that is being discussed at that time. Clarence Thomas's initial piece was with Anita Hill, and that was a hell of a piece on him, and he's going to take the same position vis-a-vis white and Black, conservative and liberal, regardless of what happens. It's the same thing with these two folks. There's nothing that can happen that I can tell you what, you give me the issue and I can tell you which side of that issue they will come down on. I can almost tell you the argument they would make, because they are defending a position that they took some time ago that they can't run away from, that is anti-Black, and they happen to be Black. And it's a real sad case of misanthropic identity for an African American.
Yeah, it's weird to me. I don't know. Like I said, Black conservatives, they finally learned. Herschel Walker learned after it was all over, when he started talking about how he realized he wasn't getting the support he thought he should have gotten, and people were talking about him behind his back. But every Black person that's gotten to some position in this Republican Party, I'll say from the mid 70s until now, have learned that they were used. Some people go to their grave and never admit it. I won't mention his name, but he died from COVID, and he used to run a pizza chain. I'll just leave it at that. Herman Cain.
Right.
He went to his death trying to support that nonsense with Donald Trump. And then these other Black folks, like Byron Donalds, somebody, and Tim Scott, they say, go sit down somewhere. You can't have a contrary opinion. This is not what this is. And Tim Scott's out there beating the bushes for votes. He should know full well that they don't do that over there. They will say that, oh, it would be lovely for Donald Trump to run with Tim Scott or Byron Donalds. But that's cynical. It's not because they believe you're competent. Donald Trump doesn't even believe you're competent. There is records of when they lost their court case on housing that Donald Trump said he didn't trust Black people with his money. He only hired Jews because he didn't trust Black people with his money. He didn't want Black people living in his housing. He said it. It's in the court filing that he lost. So anyway, we could talk about this for a long time, Val, but we're not. We've wasted an hour. So before we leave, like I always do, anything you got to tell me, anything you're working on, anything you think we should know about in a week coming up?
I can tell you that tomorrow is August the 6th. It is a heck of a day. On August the 6th of 1865, the 13th Amendment was ratified by the states. It's a hell of a day. And some say that that's the day that we should be celebrating as we celebrate Juneteenth and the freedom of the African-American culture in this country. August the 6th is also another date for me. It's the day that my wife was born, and it's the day that I put a ring on her finger and asked her to marry me. So August the 6th is my wife's birthday and our anniversary. We'll be celebrating the big 4-0 tomorrow, our 40th wedding anniversary. And I want to say to my wife, I'm going to make her listen and watch this episode of The Deal. I love you, honey. I've enjoyed 40, and let's do 40 more.
Well, there you go. Now, if y'all do 40 more, I will. I hope I'm there for the party, because I got to see that. But no, for real though, Val's wife, a lovely woman, been very supportive of his efforts over those 40 years. I know, because I've been knowing him almost that long. Great family. So congratulations, Val, and happy birthday to Val's wife. You're right about the 13th Amendment. Not enough people know that kind of stuff. Again, I tell you, that's the reason why we do the deal. We don't do it just so I can run off at the mouth. Now, that's part of it. But the other part of it is that we drop gems on you every episode, a lot of times about history. And we do it in a way to try to put it in context with current things that are going on so that you don't get fooled by folks, right? So in the meantime, look, tomorrow on Connections, we're going to be talking to the topic of what's going on in the state legislature in North Carolina is very important. So we got a good guest to talk about that. And then in the week coming up, we're always doing stuff. So go out to the dealwithedclark.com, check that out. And then you can listen to replays of all our past deal shows for the last going on 4 years now, Val. I can't believe it. It's been going on for a while now. And you can always get those. And then you can always tell people about us. Again, please, let's grow this subscriber base, because I see other podcasts and other shows out there. They say stuff, and sometimes it's not well informed. I'm not going to pick on people or whatever. I'm just going to say that a lot of people, I saw this one new one, Val, where the guy raps the news because he thinks that that's the only way we can consume it. We can have intelligent conversations without reverting to entertainment all the time. And you see that we very rarely talk about entertainment news. We didn't talk about Cardi B getting a bottle thrown at her or whatever, or Usher and Keke Palmer's boyfriend being mad. That kind of stuff. We could. And that's for other people. When you come here, we want you to get a unvarnished view of the news from a perspective that we think is important. So anyway, in the meantime, go out and do something good for somebody today, and that's all we ever ask you to do. Come back for us next week for another edition of The Deal. Have a good Saturday. Bye.
is one.